Coming up on this episode of Common Denominator.
Ever since I was a little kid, I've just liked being out there in real environments, places where there's no rules except survive, don't get killed, and move your team forward.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, where we shine a light on people striving to make the world a better place. Today, my guest is Will Gadd, the first person in the world to ice climb Niagara Falls and a former paragliding world distance record holder. Will and I just spoke about his adventures, and what resonated with me the most is that actually, to the outside world, it seems like he has no fear. But in reality, he has a lot of fear, but what he does is he does a lot of specific preparation before he goes on those adventures. Super fascinating conversation. Before we play my chat with Will, a quick reminder that if you like the show, please subscribe and follow me on social media at Popack. Now, here's my conversation with Will Gadd. Enjoy. Hey, Will.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, Moshe. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us at Common Denominator.
Thank you for having me on.
What was your first adventure and decision? It always starts with a decision to go on the different journeys that you do. Kind of what's the beginning stage for you back when you were a child, I guess?
Well, I grew up in the Canadian Rockies, which is, mountains, grizzly bears at that time probably outnumbered humans. It was a really wild place. And Canadian Rockies are on the western side of Canada. And my parents were adventurous people. So I would get out with them when I was a kid and get dragged up mountains and things. And I thought all this was just normal. But in terms of like an academic or career path, I thought I was going to be a doctor. And then I met organic chemistry, and that ripped that idea out. You had to sit there in this terrible lab, and all I wanted to do was be outside. And then I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and I worked for a judge, and he said, you're argumentative, and the bar isn't high for being a lawyer, but you're smart enough to be a lawyer, but what you really love is this outdoor stuff. So what I've done is create a career based on the outdoors and doing things that I find really interesting, and that's kind of how it all started. But ever since I was a little kid, I've just liked being out there in real environments, places where there's no rules except survive, don't get killed, and move your team forward, things like that. There aren't any written rules for the mountains. They're just rules that make sense, because if you don't understand them, you get killed. And from a very early age, that really resonated with me.
I think that's really special. It's very unique, where obviously, the skill set, whether it's for medicine, for legal, for lawyer, to become a lawyer, it's all very specific, and it's very cranial, and it's very cerebral. But then taking that, like you're saying, and I always love that when I see that, taking that and bringing that into real world, and there's no rules, like you're saying, and you're just whatever tools you have in your toolbox, using that. So I commend you for that. That's really amazing. Is there just in general, at this point of all the training that you've had, is there anything that still scares you? Or are you willing to just push forward on things?
Well, I think people are often surprised that I have really high levels of fear and anxiety. They look at what I do and they're like, you look really happy dangling off the side of that waterfall. And the truth is that I'm happy doing this stuff. But what keeps me alive is all the prep work and listening to that fear and anxiety, rather than trying to stuff it into a bucket and put a lid on it. That doesn't work. That explodes like some kind of bad horror movie. When you lock all that shit down, it eats you. It blows up. So what I try to do is listen to it. I'm like, why am I anxious? Why am I afraid? So, it starts off with this really great idea. Let's do something cool together. Let's do something magic. But then how do we do that? And in my world, it's really hazardous. So how do we do that as a team and do a good job of it and come back? And that's where some of the tools that I use come in, like listening to that anxiety. If you're anxious and afraid, it's not a cue to push harder. It's a cue to get your mind in order, figure out why you're anxious, why you're afraid, what you can do about it. And then you can go in and act not just with fake confidence, but with deep-seated competence. And that's what I really value, is competence.
Yeah, I love that. Whenever there's, whether it's imposter syndrome or self doubt,
Oh yeah,
all of those things, I love that tool, like you're saying, kind of why, and then breaking it down, pen to
yeah,
paper, and then that will become your weapon to move forward because you got to move forward, right? You're
yeah.
there alone and you have
Or
no choice.
sometimes it's
Uh,
interesting because in my world, sometimes I get brought into companies to talk about risk taking because a lot of companies are so afraid to take risks that they're fossilizing in place.
yeah,
Nobody wants to do anything wrong because they know that their boss will land on them or whatever. And so I often, I'm pretty good at taking risks. That's what I do. But if you have to make it a good risk, not just say, "Oh, I'm going to overcome my fear." That's not going to work out long term if you ignore those emotions. It's you got to integrate them into what you're doing and take good risks, and then also be comfortable with failing.
right.
And I don't mean like accept it and be happy about it. I hate failing. Failing sucks, and sucking sucks. I'm sure you can
Sure.
relate to that. When you're doing a
Yes.
bad job, it sucks.
Uh,
you know,
but
when I
but
lose a
but
competition,
but I
bleh.
think I think that if people, to that point, if they reframed failure, that's super important because that helps you. If I always say if if good is good and bad is good, at least how you understand it now, then everything actually becomes good. So if we have the definition of failure, right? Definition of failure, oh, society that's bad. No. That is a learning experience. And really, what did I learn from that? I think of,
Yeah, I mean, people deal with it differently. Some people are like, "Oh, you sound like you've got a very positive attitude toward it." I don't, man. When I don't win a competition I'm okay with not winning. Like if you performed your best and like prepared your best and you don't win, but I'm not okay with failing to meet my own potential. And so when that happens,
mm.
I tend to listen to a lot of 80s punk, drink a lot of coffee, and turn out all the lights and sit in darkness until I get my shit together, bluntly.
Yeah,
Like it's a lash after a poor performance. I want to use that as a as a force to drive myself forward. Like there's the positive power of positive stuff, but sometimes there's also you can use those negative emotions to really dig in until you grab them by the throat and choke them into submission and figure out
yeah.
how to do better.
No,
And
everybody, 100%. I always say everybody has what works for them, right?
yeah,
The whole idea is like get the results no matter what, right? Like try. And I love the idea that you're saying about potential, right? It's you versus you. Only you
yeah,
know that, right? So it's like that's what would upset you. It's not like if I did my best, I truly did my best, and you know
yeah,
that in your heart, then you did your best. Then that it is what it is, right?
yeah.
I'd always
You
think
can live
about
with
that.
that.
Is there a particular achievement that comes to your mind as the one that you're most proud of?
Well, I mean, oddly enough, it's I've done some stuff. I've won a lot of comps, set some records, done some things, but I'm most proud of the safety record in my teams. We go into really hazardous places and work in high hazard environments. And we watch out for each other. And we work together and we bring everybody back. And we have had accidents and we've had some close calls and had some luck for sure. But I am proud of that environment that we create together and work in together. Like, I'm dealing with like Niagara Falls. Things go
Yeah.
wrong in that environment, and I've got to have a team of people that supports me, but also supports each other. And so surviving is probably the thing I'm most proud of, both individually and in the team environments I work in. It sounds
Yeah.
weird, but
No, to
a lot of
get
my friends aren't around anymore. So I'm
yeah, that's a
every
real
day I wake up and I'm like, it's a good day to live.
no, it's a real thing. I as a layperson, I'm thinking about okay, climbing Niagara Falls, ice
Yeah,
Niagara Falls. I'm thinking to myself, and I know you were the first person to do that. I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's out there. You know what I mean? Like, okay, something goes wrong. That's not good, right? And so I mean, what goes into that process? So you're like, okay, me and my team, first of all, getting everybody in sync, training in sync. So what does that look like? Ice climbing Niagara Falls.
So it started years before that climb, and getting the permits was a nightmare. I heard no so many times. I think, I did 12 trips to Buffalo, New York to work through the permitting and the logistics of it all. And just every opportunity was no. And you can respond to that by saying, I'm going to get to yes somehow. But for me, you got to go deeper and ask, why did I get the no? What did I not listen to? What did I not prepare for? And it's a basic bit of like acceptance that the universe is kind of right and I'm not. And then I would go back and be like, well, I didn't actually give them what they needed. I didn't give them a safety plan that made sense to them, or I just gave them I think it's the coolest idea ever. Everybody should think it is. But if you're the person in charge of the park, you're like, you're going to have an accident. You're going to make Niagara Falls look terrible globally. So what can I give that person? What can I give the New York State Police to help them in their lives? And, you got to listen and then get past that no by helping give people what they need to move forward. So yeah, huge. And then, everything from the safety briefing, which is tools we're going to use today to survive, all the way back to those initial meetings and just listening to other people and what they needed to make it work. So all kinds of tools there.
And how much time was that? Like, in other words, so you finally got there, right? You and your team, and you're climbing. Over what period of time did that climb take?
It took 2 years and a lot of work from a lot of good people. I had to learn about the U.S. political system, which is, how you work with that, and that was technical, and just so many. It took 2 years of work for about 3 hours of climbing. That's what the work to climb, and the climbing is what I do. The climbing was not easy. It's really serious, and you have to have a very narrow focus on what you're doing. But the climbing is what I do. And I'm sitting there holding meeting after meeting with great people, but their main job is to tell me no. That's the really hard part of it.
That's government for you, by the way. That's government.
Oh,
that's what they
horrendous.
do. It's like, how do I get to no, not how do I get to yes? That's their general framework. Yeah.
Well, and it's a pervasive problem in society is people don't want to take risks, because if you take a risk and it doesn't go well, then everybody's like, oh, you've failed. And why didn't you see all this coming? Hindsight's just awesome for seeing errors, but we have to take risks to go forward. So how do we take good risks? And as you say, sounds like you've got some experience with that. The base position is no.
That's exactly right. I think, I spent time in Tanzania actually, and I know you did the, that kind of last ice. It was almost 20,000 feet. Because I know, like, in reference, like Colorado, like Vail or whatever, it's like 10 or 11,000. Almost double that, right? So how's that? I remember being at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. So I had like personal experience there. How was that climb?
Well, I've been to Kilimanjaro twice, and anybody can go there and climb that mountain who's got some basic physical fitness. And it's a cool experience. It's just the Tanzanian culture and how they work in the world is so very different that it's worth just going to Tanzania. And if you can climb Kilimanjaro, it's not that expensive to do as a guided trip, relatively speaking, and highly recommend that. It'll change how you look at things for sure. But there's also ice on top. And I did 2 trips there. The first was just to climb the ice, except most of it was missing because the glaciers are retreating. And rather than lament that, we're like, okay, well, we'll climb what we're here. We'll document the changes. And then we went back a few years later to help a scientist who's been studying the weather on top of Kilimanjaro for 25 years, rebuild his weather station and try to do another ice route that hadn't been done in a few decades. But due to climate change, that was gone. And, I'm kind of the canary in the coal mine. Old time coal miners used to go into the mine, and when the canary fell over, they're like, the air is no good. And I sort of like the ice climbers, ice is all gone. We have an issue here. So I've been trying to support scientists in their climate research globally as well.
I think that's great. I know that you're kind of a UN spokesperson, right? So how'd that come about? Because obviously you're very passionate about preserving the planet.
Well, I think we need global cooperation to solve global problems, and most problems are actually global. The news tends to focus on what's right there, but everything from inter-country conflicts to climate change, we need global solutions. We need to work together, as we did to solve the problem with the CFCs and the ozone hole. We did it. So we can do it. There's a history of this, and it affects all of us. If you live in a low-lying country, it affects you. If you live in a hotter country, it really affects you. And I see these changes. And so for me, it is personal. When I show up and literally half my glacier, like this is a big glacier, is missing. Like imagine if you came into work one day and you were like, "Hey, where's my office building?" That's what's happening to me globally. And so it's personal, but it's through organizations like Protect Our Winters and the United Nations, I can help a little bit just by showing things. I don't want to lecture people. I want to show the changes, and hopefully they make sense to people.
Yeah, because I know that there are countries that participate more, and there are countries that participate less. So like you're saying, globally, people together can really make that change. I definitely agree. It's team effort, right? It's always about the team.
We're one people, man. Doesn't matter where in the world you came from. We're the same. This is a global problem, so we gotta kind of get a handle on that. And I'm not for like global government or whatever, but this is just working together. And I think that's something that we can do. And when we do it, great things happen. So I'm optimistic.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Common Denominator podcast. My guest is Will Gadd, the first person in the world to ice climb Niagara Falls. Next week, I'll speak with Dr. Sanjay Juneja, a nationally recognized oncologist. If you haven't heard, there are some incredible game-changing developments in the cancer world, including promising news on a vaccine. Dr. Juneja will tell us why there's so much optimism among doctors in cancer care. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Now, back to the show. So what would you say either next on your bucket list or the next journey that you have lined up for yourself?
A couple things. I've been working on a project in Antarctica for a few years. So you were always reading in the news, Antarctic glacier falling into the ocean. It's like, and then there's some horrible picture of like, could be, an ice cube in your drink, or it could be Manhattan. We don't really know. And so I want to put a human scale on that. And I'm working on a project in Antarctica for 2024 that looks like it'll go. And been a lot of failure, a lot of no's on that one, but we're getting there. And I hope to do that. And then I'm also trying to change some things in my industry, which is the outdoor industry. But for example, accident reporting, if people have an incident and they don't want to talk about it because they end up getting ridiculed. And so we lose all this information. But some of the lessons I've learned in the corporate world with higher functioning corporations, they have good incident reporting systems. And they don't fire people for having an incident. They fire them when they don't report an incident. And that's a really subtle change that changes the culture of safety and operations a lot. So I'm trying to make changes both, globally, but then also within my industry, and help people be a little bit safer and bring people like you. You got it in your eyes. You'd like ice climbing. I'm a guide. I take people out. And
I do.
try it.
Well, I definitely snowboard, and I definitely understand it. In my younger years, when my son's 17, he's getting into it, and
cool.
I definitely understand the outdoors. It's something that definitely speaks to me.
But do you live in Florida now, or where do you live?
in Miami Beach. Yeah, I live in Miami Beach. It's different. I make a joke in Florida. So our mountains are basically the garbage heaps that we have a little bit in North Florida. That's our mountains. Otherwise, we're like flat.
But I was blown away. I was in Florida doing some dive training a few years ago. And we're in this place called Ginny Springs. I don't know if you've been there.
I've heard of Ginny Springs, yeah.
It's gorgeous. This crystal clear water bubbling up in this lush jungle, and we're diving around, and people are floating down the river on inner tubes. And I had to reevaluate my perspective of Florida. It's not all flamingos. You got some beautiful natural areas there.
So no, we do. I do spend time. I bring the kids out. We go to state parks. That also surprised me. It took me a while. I moved here 16 years ago. It took me a while to see that and spend time in the parks. And we have our Everglades as well. So we have ocean Everglades,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of amazing stuff in Florida. So I'm
You
very
know,
happy to be a Floridian.
well, I'll give you a shout when I'm there. If you want to come ice
For
climbing when
sure.
you're in Canada, give me a shout. But what you just said is really important. I think it's everywhere you go in the world, there's beautiful things and interesting people, and that's the coolest thing about traveling to me is you get a different perspective. You're like, well, this isn't just this way, and I've been told these people are, they're bad people. Then you get there, like they're just like me, man. I'm trying to figure it out,
I mean,
and so we need more of that.
I do say that a lot. Look, you and I are both on the same page. Common denominator. The only thing is to
Yeah,
talk about the things we have in common. That's it
yeah,
as humans. Let's at least have
yeah.
those conversations. So I definitely am with you on that. I want to, my other life, I do run a business, and I do understand that as you grow, the companies take, or the people in the companies, that's what drives the company, take less and less risk. What are the top, two or three pieces of advice? So people are not, and you're working with these corporations, and people are just not taking the risks. And in order to grow or stay relevant, they got to take the risks. So, what practical tools, what piece of advice do you give to these people, part of the companies that you work with?
Well, I could tell probably at your companies people do take risks because you just said that. And that's actually something that's not clear. A lot of corporate culture is based on taking as little risk as possible. But we
Mm,
don't hear a lot, from Kodak anymore because nobody wanted to take a
right.
risk on digital cameras. So there's probably somebody in the C-suite at Kodak is going, this digital stuff's bullshit, and
Yeah.
and not willing to, and it's seeing it as a threat rather than a potential opportunity. So the first thing is leadership, and what you just said is really important. And then also defining what level of good outcome you can live with and what level of bad outcome you can live with. So, for example, Google says, hey, you can waste half of your Fridays. We can handle that level of productivity loss on wild ass ideas. They don't say bet the ship on a tiny new project.
Right.
So going, right, we're going to give you this amount of time, or we can handle you losing $5,000 in your
Mm,
operation, or 20 or 50 or 5 million, or whatever the scale is that you're working on. And we expect you to lose that some of the time. There has to be an expectation
sure.
that taking risks will involve the downside of that risk some of the time. So it's like, hey, we expect you to lose this amount of money once a year, or you're not trying new things enough. And it's a counterintuitive thing for a lot of business people to think about. But if you don't have the freedom to lose, then you can't really win. And so I try to set that up with balanced risk for people and for companies.
I love that idea of balanced risk and making awareness of it. Just the other day, I had my monthly meeting, and the thing that I always say is, I said, our company, our main company, we buy distressed real estate. That's what we do, and we
Mm-hmm.
create value by you know putting dollars in and stabilizing the assets. And I said that's what we do. We actually, the reason why we get outsized returns is because we're taking specific calculated risk and
Mm-hmm.
driving that. Every single one of our assets is that. We're outside of the bell curve, and we're getting the reward for that. And
Yeah.
and I told it, and so I said that's what we got to do. And it's what my grandfather said many times to me growing up. As long as you win more than you lose in this
Yeah.
life, you're doing fantastic,
Do you
right?
have a percentage of deals that you expect to not work out?
Uh, well, we try to keep on pivoting, and we try to keep on winning. It happens to be, and the losses get less over time. Fine
Yeah.
tuning the people, keep reinvesting in the people, but it could be 70-30, but the
Yeah.
70 should hopefully be triples or home runs. Hopefully,
Yeah.
as you know, it's always that's what I'm always doing the math in my head. I'm kind of like thinking about that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I definitely, when you come down to Florida, maybe meet the team and we'll hang out.
Loved it.
Yeah, that's great. Hearing that perspective, when you're actually out there doing the action of, in hazardous environments. So I definitely,
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate that. I know
Well,
people.
not to
Yeah,
interrupt you, but what you
yeah,
just said is really interesting. Like
yeah.
you are taking those risks to get those returns so your company is viable and goes forward. And
That's
if you
exactly what
don't
it
do that,
is, right? Flipping it on
yeah,
its head, right?
yeah,
It's not anything else, right? How we grew these 12 years is because we did that. It's
yeah,
not, oh, let's avoid that and cruise. No way. No way. Have that passion, drive it. That's what everybody's here. We have our purpose. This is our team. This is what we're doing.
yeah.
And you know what? We manage, and it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody, but together with the team, it's 2 + 2 = 5. And now
Yeah.
and now we have exponential compounding over time.
No,
That's
and you know that
yeah,
some of the things you do aren't going to work out. You're comfortable with that as
yeah,
long as you're hitting on more, and that'll keep it going. But if you're a company that says we can't ever have that deal that goes bad, we can't try that thing that doesn't work, that
yeah.
is long term not going to work. So
Right.
that's a
How
lot of
about
it.
even better? The nature of business equals calculated risk. That is
Yeah,
just the nature of all. Then don't be in business. Don't be in business if you don't want to move forward with the potential of calculated risk. Like even that, I think
yeah.
about. That's it. That's just what it is. It's not
It's
for everybody. Want to do it, do it. But I know even more tools if we can give the audience. Everybody deals with different types of fears. What advice would you give people dealing with whatever type of fear they're dealing with to conquer those fears?
Well, one thing that's helped me a lot, and I work with people in fear in a couple of different environments. I work with them in the mountain environment where they're often very afraid of perceived risk. They think if I slip here, I'm going to die. And I'm like, well, actually, you're on a rope that holds 5,000 pounds. You're not going anywhere. But if their perception is that they slip, they die, that's how their brain works. And fear is brainstem stuff. It's not rational stuff. So what I often have to do is rather than getting them to focus on fighting the fear, I get them to look at it and figure out what it is for them and why, and get that emotional part of their brains working again so that they can process it. If they're locked at brainstem level, I can tell them that rope holds 22 kN and is never, he's never doesn't make any difference. They have to feel in their brains that they are actually safe. And so the first tool is to recognize that fear and to not keep pushing it down, because if you keep pushing it down, it's going to blow up. That which we ignore gets larger, whether it's an item in a spreadsheet
Yeah.
or fear, it keeps growing. So
Name the thing, as they say. I always think about
yeah,
that.
name the thing. Yeah,
Name the
I
thing.
like that. I
Yeah.
name the thing. So the first thing is to go, right, I'm afraid. That's okay. Why am I afraid? What can I do about it? And is there a good reason for it? Maybe there is a good reason for it. A lot of times our subconscious brains are operating at high speeds and your gut's going, something's really wrong here. And I don't want to sign this check. Why is that? And you break it down. Maybe you've missed something. Maybe you haven't. And if you chew on it and digest it and spend a little bit of time with it, especially in high consequence situations, then you'll make a better decision. Now, if it's about getting a date, make the call. You got nothing to
Yeah.
lose but a no, and
That's it.
overcome your fear. Make that call, man. But in terms of like high consequence decision making, yeah, if you've got a lot of fear about that, it's probably time to dig into that and analyze why that is and come up with some solutions for it.
Yeah.
Like have real solutions to the problems, not just recognition.
Yeah. Agreed. What is something that comes to your mind that you're deeply grateful for?
I'm grateful. I'm deeply grateful just for being alive. Like
Mm.
it's a great ride. Like I get to wake up in the morning and I'm really tremendously lucky to. I live in a country with relatively clean water and environment. I'm not in fear of the police. Like I wake up in a world that's pretty darn good to start with. Honestly, like I am extremely fortunate that way. And if you don't travel, you don't realize that.
Yeah.
When you're a lot of countries in the world, it is not like that. So, and even in our countries, our very wealthy countries, sometimes if you look different, maybe it's not like that. So I am grateful for that base starting point. But then my
Yeah.
family and my friends and the opportunities I get to. My job today is to talk to you. How cool is that? Like this is life's pretty good,
Yeah.
man.
No, to have that attitude is really infectious. So it's great. It's super important. And what's something about you that people don't know?
Oh. I do think people often assume I'm just sort of fearless. They see me doing this stuff and they're like, "You're a whack job." And I think again, it's like I listen to that fear and work with it and try to, live up to my own basic moral code of just being decent, whether it's in business or family or life. It's like, you probably know when you're doing the wrong thing. So do the right thing, be decent, and live another day, help people.
So, Will, this has been a tremendous interview. Thank you. I've really gained a lot. Hopefully the audience will. I know they will. If people want to learn more about you and follow you on social media, how would they be able to do that?
WillGadd.com is the website, Real Will Gadd on social. Go on Twitter, Captain Adventure on TikTok. You'll find me. I'm out there. And I love getting questions from people. I try to respond to them. That's my way of paying back. So if you've got a question about whatever, hit me up. Love to hear from you. And I'll look you up next time I'm down in your area of the woods. Love to see you.
It'll be my honor and pleasure. I really would appreciate that, Will. Thank you so much.
Likewise. And if you're up north, say hello.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Will. Next week, I'll speak with Dr. Sanjay Juneja. Dr. Juneja is the Chief of Oncology Service at Baton Rouge General. He'll tell us just how close we're getting to a cancer vaccine and why there's more optimism than ever in the world of oncology. Please subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode and follow me on social media at Popack. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.